increasing every year if they're in a subsidized rate, according to these schedules. So if you look, I mean, basically, this is only 15%, not 18%. But you know, by year 5, you've pretty much doubled your rate, right? Your premium is going to double basically every 5 years until you cap out at what your full, you know, standard rate is, the unsubsidized rate, which is called the post-firm rate. And again, you know, this client, may cap out at 5,500. You know, not everybody's going up to 11,000. A lot of people are going higher than 11,000. So again, you need to advise the client about where they're going to cap out, but also realistically think about what that means monthly. Sort of apropos of your question, you know, these rate increases, the difference between, you know, a $75 a month difference can be pretty tough for a lot of people to absorb. Okay, so again, now we're going to start unpacking flood insurance. That was sort of a glimpse of where we're going to get to. What factors go into flood insurance rating? The flood zone. X is the moderate risk zone. AE is the high risk zone. VE is the highest risk zone. VE stands for velocity something or other. That's the wave zone where you're going to be hit by waves, not just flooding. The mitigation options for people in the VE zone are much more difficult. These are the homes that have to be up on, you know, stilts, basically. And the premiums for VE zones are pretty astronomical. Or you may find that your client is not in a zone at all. For rating purposes, that's going to be treated similar to X, but we'll go into the details of that. All of the clients that are coming to you through RTAPP are either currently in an AE or VE zone or going to be in an AE or VE zone. That's why they qualify for RTAPP. So you're going to be counseling them on how to deal with this, the changes. Okay, the second main factor is the elevation of the bottom floor relative to sea level. So if you have a house with a basement, the basement floor is the home's elevation. If you have a house on a crawl space above ground with flood vents, the first floor above ground is the home's elevation. If you have an elevated home above an enclosure that's just used for parking and storage, then again, that floor above the elevation is what the home gets rated on. So the mitigation options, aside from raising the mechanicals, all the other mitigation options you'll be discussing are designed to raise basically the elevation of what's considered the bottom floor. Okay, again, above sea level is not the same as above ground level, and the basement principle applies to crawl spaces. If there's a sub-ground crawl space, you're going to get elevated from the bottom of that, or you're rated from the bottom of that crawl space, unless you mitigate. Okay, the third factor is FEMA's base flood elevation requirement, the expected flood level of a 100-year storm above sea level. Sandy, by the way, was something closer to a 700-year storm. That's not a 100-year storm. A 100-year storm is not as bad as Sandy. Whether the home was built before 1983, whether this older home subsidy kicks in or not is another key factor. And then the last thing is the building characteristics. Does it have a basement, a crawl space, how many stories? Is it your primary residence? This primary residence, by the way, is something you want to be watching out for when you're helping clients with flood insurance. I've had several clients whose flood insurance policy was rated as if it was a rental home when they in fact lived there. Correcting that can again save the homeowner thousands of dollars. Yeah.
Can you explain the difference between a basement and a cellar?
Yeah. For flood insurance purposes, that doesn't matter, but clients are using these different terms because those are city terms. A cellar is more than half below ground, and a basement is more than half above ground. So that's the only distinction there. The difference between a basement or a crawl space, that becomes pretty significant in terms of rating. And basically a crawl space is anything that's, about 4 feet high or shorter, and something that's no more than 2 feet below ground. I'll go into these definitions with you later, because you're gonna have to figure out which it is. Is it a basement or is it a crawl space for your clients? And again, those are FEMA definitions. The basement cellar distinction, though, is a city definition. So they're all the same for our purposes, or they're both the same. Okay, so floodhelpny.org. You guys have already had some introduction to floodhelpny.org, right? So, in the future, hopefully not too far future, that program is going to be something you can use to get rate estimates for your clients based on different mitigation factors. It's not there yet, so I'm not going to train you yet on that, but we will later once it's fully working. In the meantime, though, floodhelpny.org is where you're going to go to find out what your client zone is and the base flood elevation requirement. So again, that's the first 2 pieces of information you need. The other ones are in order to be able to give somebody an idea of their flood insurance rate. The other thing you're going to need is the ground level elevation above sea level. That you're going to get from the elevation certificate that your client has. By the way, I gave you a copy of an elevation certificate just so you sort of are familiar with what the document looks like. And in part 2 of the training, we're going to go through what all these numbers mean down here under section C. So this is what's going to tell you the ground level elevation. Your clients and the elevation certificate both together are going to fill in the details about the home's characteristics. And that's the basis of how you're going to do it. So 2 pieces of information you get from here. The rest of it you're going to have to get from the elevation certificate for your client's, your client's description of whether their house has certain features. All right, so now I'm about to give you a preview of the lowest floor guide. This is a nightmare, so but it's a nightmare that you guys all need to embrace. This is FEMA's guide that tells you where your client's home is going to be rated from, what floor they're going to be rated from. You get to the lowest floor guide by just searching flood insurance manual. You just Google that, it's going to pull up. You click the most recent one, which is April 2016, and then one of the chapter sections in the PDF list is lowest floor guide. That's where you're going to find it. Again, we'll go over all this later about where you find these things. This is the lowest floor guide. This is page 1 of the lowest floor guide. Basically, what you want to pay attention to is these different building diagrams describe different house characteristics. And then the little arrow that says C2A points to the floor that's going to be used for rating. So if you look down here, if it's split level that has part of it as a basement floor is what's used for rating. If it's a walkout basement floor is what's used for rating. If it's one of these unfortunate homes, where essentially the backyard is kind of dug out, the way this happens in my experience based on talking to clients who have these, is that this is an older home. At some point, the city raised the street to prevent flooding. All the homes around it were built afterwards, and they were all, the land was filled in, so that the later built homes were built to the level of the street, and that leaves many of the older homes in this basically pit. So again, they're going to be measured from the floor of the basement in the pit. Again, here you got a basement floor. If it's a slab on grade, these are both slab on grade houses, no crawl space yet, right? They're going to be elevated from the top of the slab. All right, now this is getting into the more complicated diagrams of an elevated home. Again, this is like a home that's up on piers. This is a home that has partially enclosed space underneath it. This is a walkout basement, again, that is going to be rated from the basement floor. This, so this is a subgrade crawl space. This is an above ground crawl space. If you notice on page 2 here, diagrams 6 through 9, there's C2A and C2B. The difference between whether they're going to get rated from C2A or C2B, which is significantly better for a lot of people, is flood vents, right? All of these diagrams have flood vents. If you've got flood vents, you can potentially get yourself higher. So for some people who already have a crawl space, but it's just cinder blocks, if they can somehow get flood vents in there, they may be able to achieve significant savings. And again, if it's a crawl space that's only, a foot below ground, filling that with gravel and installing flood vents can make a big difference. All right, so that's the lowest floor guide. Just keep it in your mind as something you're going to need to worry about in the future. And again, this is a blown up picture, just to make the point that, if you're rating a house with a basement, you've got to rate it from there. Don't make the mistake of rating it based on this, because you're going to be off by thousands of dollars and potentially cause the client to make some very bad decisions. Okay, again, the relevant flood zones in New York City are AE and VE. These are what's called the special flood hazard areas, or you'll see it abbreviated as SFHAs, high risk zones, high premiums. X zone is moderate risk. It's not low risk, it's moderate risk. And then no zone is if you call up a flood map and it says NA, that's what you're looking at as a no zone. There are in New York City some AO zone properties. This isn't the whole universe of flood zones in New York City. It's 98% of flood zones in New York City. There are some people who are in AO zones along rivers and creeks. That's not going to be your problem, because you're going to be dealing with people who are in the coastal flooding zones. But just so you're aware, if you have a client and they show you their flood insurance declaration page, I'll show you that in a minute, and it says AO, that's probably a mistake. So it's a mistake you want to correct. And this is a copy of a declaration page that the client's flood insurance premium is based on. All clients with flood insurance have one of those, and it gives you some important information. Okay, so this is what Flood Help NY used to look like. I still have these screenshots left over, just to show the difference in sort of current and future zones. And again, we're looking at the Rockaways mostly here, but some of Canarsie and other areas. So this is the current flood map. The purple is AE, the yellow is X, and the orange is VE. Fortunately, not many people live in these orange parts. There aren't that many buildings in the orange parts. There are a lot of buildings in the purple parts. So this is the flood maps today. This is that same area under the preliminary firm. So if you look at it, virtually the entire peninsula has gone into high-risk zones here, with the exception of a few little pockets. This is going to be scaled back. We just don't know how far it's going to be scaled back, right? So again, we're not going to stick with this. This is what we have now. It's going to get worse. It's not necessarily going to get as bad as that. I think probably in the Rockaways it will, but in other areas it won't, right? The Rockaways is in a particularly bad situation, right? Because of sea level rise and everything. And again, this is the old system, but if you type in an address, Flood Help NY is going to tell you your current zone and your future zone. So this is somebody who's now in an X zone, no flood insurance purchase requirement. If they do have flood insurance, they're not paying very much for it. Most likelihood in the future, it's going to get much worse for them. And this is, again, the building was built in 1997, so it's not going to be eligible for the pre-firm subsidy. All right, so again, this is just another example of the analysis. So this is a home in Midland Beach, Staten Island. It's pre-1983. This first set of numbers is projections based on the phase out of the pre-firm subsidy. This is happening, nothing has changed to prevent this. And the second part is due to the map change. This is the part that's in flux. Okay, so his current zone is AE, his base flood elevation requirement is 8.9 feet above sea level. His ground height is 6.32 feet above sea level. His subsidized premium is $4,793 already. That's what he's paying already. His unsubsidized premium is going to be $7,000. If he fills in his basement, he's going to drop it down to $4,700, or about $4,800. And again, whether this is already affordable, whether this is home saving compared to that is going to vary so much between your clients, depending on their financial circumstances. Some of your clients, the bad news, if none of this is sustainable, then, they're going to want to think about selling their home, and that's not going to be a nice conversation to have with anybody. So, broach that option very delicately when you're talking to a client about that. Yeah.
But we can't really sell it because we have the same issue with the purchase. It has to be the same thing.
Yeah, well, so the advantage actually of selling now, and I hate to say this because it's kind of deceptive, is that the market doesn't yet understand about flood insurance premium increases. So once the market understands that, that's when you're going to start to see the price drops. That hasn't really hit yet. So if you've got a client that, there is no way for them to make this affordable, they need to know that, and they need to start thinking about whether or not getting out now makes sense, is possible, or making a transition plan. But yeah, it's really depressing.
So you're saying that banks not yet demand a flood insurance when somebody get a loan to purchase?
They do, but they're
then-
basing it on the subsidized annual premium. If it's a pre-1983 home, the mandatory insurance is going to be the subsidized level. But then it's going to step into this level. Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen two cases recently of people who purchased into what will become the high-risk floodplain and did not know that because their real estate agent and their lender both tell them the part of the truth that they needed to know, or part of the truth, which is that, no, you do not need a flood insurance, okay? Because they're currently in the X zone. Okay, but they are definitely going to be going into the high risk, the special flood hazard area, and within the foreseeable future, they'll be looking at a much different situation. The lender cannot impose a flood, the lender does not have to impose a flood insurance requirement unless it is federally backed mortgage and it is in the actual floodplain. The one that's being used for rating purposes.
For now.
But I think that we're going to be seeing, we may be seeing lenders, because they can say, we want you to have a flood policy anyway, okay? And I haven't seen that yet, but I suspect we may, because they can do that.
Is there any estimate as to how long we're going to be in that in-between part between phase out and the new map?
That's the $1 million question. And it's a question that your clients are going to want you to answer. And so the estimate that I heard from the city is it's going to take about 3 years for FEMA to go back and redraw new maps. So as of yesterday, yes. The initial projection was that the new flood maps were going to take effect in 2017. That's definitely not going to happen, right? So now we're looking at out to late 2019. There may be some cushion after that because, the city, there's a comment period, the city could find something else wrong with the maps and file another appeal. So once the maps come out, there may be lag time before they're implemented, right? So the future firms that we've been working on now, the preliminary firms, they came out in 2013 and they were supposed to be adopted in 2017, right? So that was a 4-year cushion. We may not get that long of a cushion. So I think the safe things to say, it'll be inside of 10 years. I would say like between 5 and 10 years. That's the time we've bought, so yeah.
So for the people who we are counseling, as part of agencies that do homeownership education and promotion, is there a way to include this in our homeownership promotion activities?
Definitely. Yeah, and I think it's really important that people who do that kind of homeownership counseling also understand this. Because let's say you're working on a mortgage modification based on current flood insurance premiums that within 3 years are going to be, much, much higher. The homeowner needs to understand that and understand that they need to plan for that. If it's not going to work, maybe they shouldn't buy there. I don't think anybody should be buying homes in the AE zone anymore. But
those are the most affordable areas right now in this town.
Exactly.
First time home buyers who feel as though their life depends on up and buying a property. I got homeowners crying because they can't get a pre-approval there, let alone once they get the property and then this kicks into place. It's going to be a backlash. That's just ridiculous.
yeah, it's bad. It is.
Build
Fortunately, the silver lining is you'll be dealing with people who may have mitigation options, and you're going to help them find those in some cases, and save homes. But you're right. It's rough, and that's why a lot of people, the idea that everybody should just move out of a flood zone is just not possible. Even the people who are getting buyouts from Build-A-Back
Right.
can't afford to buy a home
Another
anywhere
home.
else.
Exactly.
So it's,
I just want to point out, although these financial implications are absolutely crucial for a homeowner to understand, one thing they need to also understand is that well before the maps kick in, right now, the flood risk is real. Okay? And they can get flood insurance now, it's much more affordable, but waiting until they get pushed by the legalities of this is not in their best interest. It is in their best interest to have flood protection now. Mother Nature is not going to wait for us to sign off.
well, and the other thing too that we haven't talked about that is also going to be a potential lifeline for people is the concept of grandfathering. We will talk about that. Essentially what grandfathering could do is, well, actually, that's not going to help this guy, is it? What grandfathering would lock him in at the 7,000 before it goes up to the 11,000. That's not going to help a lot of people. But if you've got somebody who's in an X zone who's being mapped into an AE zone, if they can grandfather into the X zone rates, that may help them. Grandfathering is tenuous, so it's not the best option, but if it's your only option, rely on it. We'll go through the rules about who can and can't grandfather. It's not going to be as easy, I think, for a lot of people in low-income neighborhoods as the city may expect, because you can't grandfather if you've ever let your policy lapse. If you've ever been in default on your mortgage, there's a good chance that your mortgage company let your policy lapse. So anyway, well, you're going to have all of the tools that you are available to try and help people, but for some people, it's going to be bad news no matter what. Go ahead.
Where are we in the timeline with subsidies?
Where are we in the subsidies timeline? They started phasing out in 2014. Initially, the legislation, the Bigger Waters Act of 2012, pre-Sandy legislation, had the phase out happening in 5 years. But then in 2013, the Congress passed the HFIAA, the Homeowner Flood Insurance Affordability Act, that extended the timeline for phase out. So we're in year 2 of the phase out. Okay, subsidies. The next slide is subsidies. You know, I wonder if it makes, let me see what's coming up. Let's hold off and let's take a break and talk about subsidies after. So maybe 15 minutes, if you come back at like 20 to 4, does that make sense? The bathrooms are